Outcomes Fund, the guidelines. Now, if you remember, I'm Richard as well. If you remember last committee, we had some finer details to sort out, and Member Wilson and others and myself wanted to see some changes to that, so we pulled that last minute and we're just bringing it back today. I think Nick's keen to take it as read. We know that people had read it last time and I'm sure you have again, but if you want to speak to any part of that right now, otherwise we can go to questions.
Through the Chair, just briefly on the general direction of which we're heading, is just a reminder that previously the Māori Outcomes Fund was something that was the way to receive funding was through directorates, through internal processes, where we would be working with others externally to allocate that funding. The big shift of which we've been moving in this general direction now for over the last year is that these funds will now be made available externally. So that means that external agencies that are committed to Tāmaki Makaurau and to our Māori communities, mana whenua, mātā waka, are able to receive funding from the Māori Outcomes Fund. And we'll be doing that through an expressions of interest process. The second big shift, of course, is that the Policy Planning and Development Committee will be the committee that makes the decision. So rather than being an internal process where those they're looked at by staff and allocated by myself under delegation, they will be coming back to this committee for decisions. So that's the broad trajectory of where we're heading with the Māori Outcomes Fund. Otherwise, we'll take this paper as read and happy to answer any questions.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Nick. Got some pātai. Member Wilson, kia ora.
Kia ora, thanks for representing the paper. Just a couple of questions just to amplify and clarify some points. My first one, as has previously been indicated, is what support or resourcing is available from Ngā Matarai for those entities that may not have sufficient admin or funding application support internally.
Thank you, Member Wilson. That's a great question. So there is support within our teams. So we have allocated amongst iwi a support person for each of the iwi to go to. Of course, because we're opening it up, it could be for other entities that there might be some work for us to think about how we do that, but we will do that through things like workshops, engagement, good information, communications out. So a long period where the expressions of interest process is open and allowing for us to be able to communicate well in the first instance, and then looking at ways in which we can do that. But certainly with iwi, and you'll note from the paper that iwi order from the Tāmaki order framework is our priority. We'll be certainly allocating staffing resource to support each of those iwi as they might seem necessary for applications to the fund.
Thank you. Then the internal application, if that's exceeded on the basis that external demand has been exhausted, what process governs what happens next, and will mana whenua be advised?
Yes, the quick answer to that question is yes, mana whenua will be advised. We'll go through a process in terms of their assessment for mana whenua to see all internal applications to the fund, seek their views. If we do go over that target of around that 1.2 million, as we've sort of indicated in the paper, then it will come back to this committee for a decision on what might be allocated over that. And it will only be done if external applications are under. We still have funding available after external applications.
Thank you. Last pātai, if I can. So there's an annual review of the guidelines, and I'm wondering, will the review include what's happened in the past 2 years to enable us to see if it's still fit for purpose?
Yeah, that's the general idea of what we're hoping to do. The idea is a process of of continued improvement. So we'll be drawing in from what we have seen previously, looking at the pipeline of projects that are coming, and making sure that every year we can come back to this table and talk to you about the improvements we're looking to make to the fund. And that's about process as well as about allocation of funding.
Thank you, appreciate that. Appreciate the representation.
Kia ora, Member Wilson, and thank you for your advocacy on this as well. Councillor Patterson-Hamlin.
Kia ora, te Marie. Ngā mihi mai oho mō tō mahi. Ko tahi te pātai. What is the logic behind behind the exclusion of permanent staff for the fund?
So behind?
There's an exclusion for permanent staff. Yeah.
Look, I guess what we're hoping to do with this fund is to make it more externally available to reach out into the communities and help them be able to allocate so that it's funding projects driven from the Māori community, Mātāwaka, etc. What we're actually asking all of our departments and directorates to do is to look at their internal resourcing first, making sure they're making the best use of that first, before they're actually coming to the fund for things. With staff, we know, I guess there's been a perception in previous years that we're using the fund to feather our own nest to a certain degree. And so we're just making it really clear that this is actually about making this fund externally available. We'll be looking internally for our own resourcing. That's the criteria for it. And I think generally teams are quite open to that.
Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Chair. I thought it was a wonderful question by Member Wilson around the application for the grants. I just wanted to tease out a little bit more on your answer there. I guess my concern might be if people are new to making such applications, it can be rather daunting. And so how would they, you mentioned about, I think you mentioned about them potentially coming in and teaching them in a workshop, taking them through our process, which I know we've done with other community groups in the past. How would they just ring the council number? Like, how do you think they might be able to access that and know those workshops are on, etc.?
Thanks, Councillor. That's a great question also. I can, what we have done is we've actually tested this process previously, so just through the Cultural Initiatives Fund, we've gone through a bit of a mock test, if you will, around how this might work, where we had an open process, we had a number of workshops, we reached out to all of the Mātāwaka, mana whenua, held a number of hui, had a look at what those look like. We also have a dedicated email address, all of those sorts of things that we do with all of our funds. So, and again, hence why we're wanting to have a review. This is the first time we've opened up this fund this way. So we are looking at continuous improvements as we go, but we're reasonably confident from the mock test that we did with the Cultural Initiatives Fund that we can, I guess, service this process.
Good. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lee.
Is the outcome area, marae ora, could that include contributions to practical road improvements to remote marae or remote kainga?
Thank you, Councillor. So I think I'm aware of the issue that you're alluding to, particularly over on Aotea Great Barrier, where there is significant roading that's required. We need to be really clear that the Māori Outcomes Fund is not to replace business as usual work. You know, there is a requirement of transport to be looking at those roads and to fixing those, and we would basically work through a process with each of our directorates, in this instance, transport, to be looking at and prioritising those types of things for those communities. So whilst it might not be utilised for funding what is essentially a BAU process, certainly we're looking at the marae and helping of what we can do in that space. And that could be things including looking at other alternative access on their land or things like that. But ultimately, we would anticipate that it's up to the Transport Directorate to fix that process, and we'd be working really hard with the new Transport Director to ensure that that's prioritised.
Just to follow up, so given that, would it be worth an application for funding, and then you could actually adjudicate and give them advice? Would that be helpful? In theory, in principle, as it were.
Yeah, if we're talking hypotheticals, it certainly is something that perhaps an internal application might come. Not to say that we would approve that application, but certainly we would put a bit of heat on the directorate to basically be looking at their internal budgets to satisfy that particular need for a road out to that marae.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Short.
Thank you. During the annual budget consultation, when we heard from iwi mana whenua, the common theme that we kept getting back was is that they didn't have the capacity to do what we needed them to give feedback on, because we love a good consultation around here. So I'm just wondering, why isn't that part of this, or is it elsewhere? Does this fund help with that issue or not?
So over previous years, capacity for iwi has been has been taken from the Māori Outcomes Fund for iwi to engage with us, for us to have engagement with the iwi chairs, and for them to be able to do a significant amount of business with Auckland Council. So that hasn't changed. In fact, what it will mean for this is that we will be making more funding available to iwi on top of the those capacity grants. But bearing in mind, some iwi, they don't need our capacity grants in the same way others do with where they're at. So it's kind of a way that we're looking at to prioritise capacity for those that need capacity, but where we can, we would be looking at bigger projects that we might be able to do that meet the requirements of Tāmaki order, as well as things that are good for Tāmaki in general.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Really great work. Thank you so much for that. Just reading through the paper here and looking at the priorities and the sort of principles that you used to apply it. And I noticed strengthening marae is part of the principles. I think as a West Auckland councillor, you probably know what I'm going to ask, but would this include marae that are not actually physically there yet, but are part of the aspirations, such as Te Hinga?
Yeah, that's obviously this committee, as well as others, have contemplated how to support, particular marae out in the West Auckland. It's a fragile sort of scenario, but ultimately we know that working really closely with iwi, that is their number one priority. So in two ways, it'll be two stabs at this through the iwi order outcome, but also as well as through the marae order outcome. But how we do that is will be, I guess, how this group wants to make decisions. That could be we address it through the marae infrastructure program, or it could be that we assess it on its own merit.
Thank you. Just a couple more. And just on that, and I'm not sure, you answered it a little bit, but I'm just wondering if you've identified funding options and are working with Te Kawerau to realise that marae out there. What have you sort of looked at so far?
Thank you. So we've looked at what's been allocated to other marae through the marae infrastructure program. So what's the basis of that? How much have we funded other marae? So from an equity lens. Also last hui, you may recall, we were given a delegation over underspend, so that's also in the mix. And we're also talking to other parts of council as to how they might be able to support this build as well, and getting a full picture of what might be a suitable allocation through through the Māori Outcomes Fund, as well as across council altogether.
Thank you. And the last cue I think I have is, did you consider things like geographical equity here? Because I think there's a demand in the public to have funds spread out across different parts of the area, and also taking into account that populations for Māori are wildly different from ward to ward. So what part of geography have you kind of looked at?
Yeah, that's a great question. So certainly as part of the marae infrastructure program, we have considered equity, simply because we know in rural areas the money for marae is ultimately sunk into the ground into infrastructure requirements. So in that regard, we've looked at it from that perspective. With regards to the geographical spread, because you're quite right, we know that there are areas that have larger Māori populations. We've tried to look at that through the lens of our priorities. So recognising iwi order as the main priority, marae order, where we are also noting that quite a considerable amount of funds go to those urban marae, but also as hapori order as that third priority. So whilst it's not, I guess, visibly notable, it's the shift through the demographic of those areas, it's certainly through those three po that we think that we'll be able to cater for those sort of equitable outcomes.
Thank you. Sorry, last one, Chair, if you don't mind. I always like going into the risk section of these reports, and this is particularly enlightening, so thank you for that. Just looking firstly, lastly and firstly, the external applications don't have the capacity or capability to develop successful proposals. And can I just get you to talk me through a little bit about what that staff support looks like there?
I might ask Richard to get this one. You've got me on a technicality, Councillor.
Yeah, kia ora, Councillor. So, I mean, I think it sort of reverts back to what Nick said previously in terms of us doing as much outreach as possible and raising awareness of the timings and, I guess, the work or the detail that we're looking for. So we will just continue to work with applicants, raise awareness, go through that process. I think there is a lot to do, a lot of work to do to develop that pipeline, particularly to determine what impact this fund is going to have.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. On the back of Councillor Henderson, whose comments I fully support, in the case of Te Karau's project, Marae, they're right past consenting, they're at building permits, they're ready, they have to act within a certain period of time. You would have been involved in, Te Marae would have been involved in this up till now, so your answers kind of were a bit generic about, and I want to make sure that we have, we understand that it's building on what's already happened and not reassessing. Going through, we could spend as much money in-house reassessing as we could actually delivering or helping delivering.
So being very clear, we have supported in previous years the Te Kawerau Marae program through the Cultural Initiatives Fund. So previously in the consenting space, as well as through some of the design space, they have received allocations of the Cultural Initiatives Fund. So we know that that step has been satisfied. The next step we do know is that they need to go into that building process. We have been working alongside other funding agencies, including Te Puni Kōkiri, Foundation North, but of course it's quite hard for us to, I guess, have a full picture of what the funding is available when we've got external agencies, but we'll be continuing to do that. We can do a bit more thinking, Councillor, if that's what you desire, and think about how we might integrate this into the marae infrastructure program, and that might be able to give some certainty. Just noting your question there around timeframes, and we'd be happy to bring back a report to that effect if that's what this committee would like to see.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, that's the end of... Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Good morning, Chef. For those of you who don't know, we had our chef with us last night who raised $15,000 for City Mission. So well done, and you did a great job last night, by the way. Big round of applause.
Thank you.
My question, however, is, look, I'm a great fan of this. I think I love the way it complements other funding, including private and philanthropic. My question is about accountability, and it says in the paper that it supports transparency, accountability, and evaluation of impact. Is that a case-by-case evaluation, or are there set guidelines, and if so, what do they look like?
Thank you, Councillor. That's a great question. So over the last year, we've been working on a measurement and evaluation framework that goes right across all of the work that we do for Māori outcomes. So previously, the best way to explain it is that we've been looking at both basically input, what's the investment that council is making into things, and output, what is the number of activities that we're delivering. The new framework that we've been looking at includes impact and outcome. So what we have been doing, for example, at the community committee, we're bringing iwi to that and talking about their experiences with council, how our funding is working, where we can make improvements. We've also been doing assessments on every single program, piloting first to start off with, and making sure that all of our internal projects and programs have an outcome and are impacting the people that it's meant to do, and that's helping us to assess. So with the Māori Outcomes Fund, with any allocation, they would be tied into that measuring and evaluation framework.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And yeah, acknowledge you, Nick, for the work you did for the City Mission and the good kai you presented. Richard, were you going to say something? I saw you turn on your mic. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Deputy Mayor, I was just going to note that we're bringing back the evaluation of the Māori Outcomes Fund and Tāmaki Ora to this committee in Q2.
Right. Councillor Winiata, our Māori Outcomes lead, has been doing some great work in this space, would like to move. Do I have a seconder on this? Councillor Patterson-Hamlin. Is there any debate? No? Cool, thank you. All those in favour? Any opposed? Cool, carried unanimously. Thank you very much. I'll record that. Right, we move now to our Auckland Council submission on the summary offences move on orders amendment bill. Yeah. And we're just waiting for our school visitors to head off.